Kia ora, talofa, namaste, haere mai, and welcome to this week's episode of the Nichecast bumper Aotearoa sporting times at the moment, and we're here to break some of it down, just a little bit, not the whole thing, not a full steak and cheese, just a bit of steak and cheese Aotearoa sporting kōrero for you today, and I need to come correct here, Wildcard. I did highlight how I felt there was a yucky Sean Marks vibe at the Brooklyn Nets. Just some of the back channeling that you always see with NBA sources and his relationship with Woj, and just kind of the way he and the Brooklyn Nets were operating. It was just a bit yucky. I'm here to tell you that he's making some good moves right now, as of the 9th of February. I'm liking his stuff recently. You've been a big Sean Marks proponent, fanboy. I'm not sure how that sets you up with Woj, but you have appreciated Sean Marks's mahi. How are you feeling about the recent rejig? Because I think, you still got Kevin Durant. I don't see why he wants to go anywhere. Brooklyn Nets can still win games with the team they have. I think they're kind of better right now than they were with Kyrie Irving, but how are you feeling about that?
I think the Woj stuff, first of all, is kind of just one of those, part and parcel of the job. Like sometimes you got to deal with people who can be a little bit icky sometimes. Like it's just you got to do what you got to do, especially because like this was by necessity with Sean Marks. The fact that a lot of like basically you can draw a line and say if because there's the two head honchos of NBA newsbreakers. There's Shams Charania and Adrian Wojnarowski. Pretty much like Shams is younger and seems to have a lot more access to players in particular. And I would say very clearly had a line to, if not Kyrie Irving, then at least people in Kyrie Irving's sort of close confidence thereof. So if Shams is getting the Kyrie perspective, and Kyrie's perspective isn't necessarily going to be very kind towards the Brooklyn Nets organization, then the Brooklyn Nets organization, led on a basketball sense by Sean Marks, got to go equal and opposite, right? So you got to cozy up with Woj from that perspective, just because you can't have everyone trashing you with no response in the across the media frontier. So um, I think one of the reasons why I was a little bit more generous to Sean Marks throughout some rough, chaotic times there is because I was separating intent from outcome a little bit more and saying like, okay, well, he's taken a gamble in signing Irving and Durant. Like you know that could have been a volatile situation. There are people that will be saying, well, it's happened exactly the way everyone could have predicted it. Kyrie Irving's lost his mind several times, and this is you've just had to keep cleaning up the pieces until you finally traded him. Maybe, but they also signed him as a free agent, and they've traded him for some decent, like a couple. As a Mavericks fan, I can tell you, like a couple pretty decent players there coming back in return. Although Dinwiddie, of course, was already a Brooklyn Net a few years ago when during earlier times in the Sean Marks tenure. But like if you make a decision and say we're going this way, we want the superstar guys, we think this is the best way to compete, we know that it's a risk, and the risk backfires, doesn't mean you made a terrible decision if you made that decision in the knowledge that this was a potential outcome, but that there were also other potential outcomes. And before Kevin Durant got injured recently, they were looking like a team that could win a championship potentially. They were fantastic. I think a lot of people have criticized him and his organization recently for work that for outcomes of things that were it's like, yeah, they knew it might have gone this direction, but it also might not have gone this direction. This is just one of the potential outcomes. I think there's a bit of that going on. But obviously it got to the point where let's just cut our losses. Kyrie doesn't want to be here. We're going to release him as a free agent at the end of the summer because there's no way he's going to accept the value of a contract that we're willing to offer. He thinks he's worth more than we're going to pay. So trade him, get something back, a bit of return. And I think they got for someone who, like, when it first got reported that Kyrie Irving had demanded a trade or whatever, it's always weird the language they use, demanded trades or requested trades, or it seems a little bit telling there. Like, there was stuff going on about how Kyrie Irving was an untradeable asset. Nobody had any interest in taking him on. Not only did they find someone to trade him with, but they got a couple good players and a first round future draft pick and a couple second rounders. Like, they got a good haul back for him for a guy whose contract only lasts another couple months. Like, it's until the end of the season. He'll be a free agent. He might leave Dallas at that point. He might not re-sign with them. Dallas might choose not to resign him. That's a risk they're taking as well. But I think Sean Marks has done an outstandingly good job here with this deal, and probably brings back a little bit more control into the Nets front office that he had allowed to slip away, but probably got to the point where you needed to bring that back. You need to tighten up on those reins. He's done that. There is still a day to go in the trade windows, so it's not impossible that tomorrow Kevin Durant wakes up on a different team. I suspect that probably won't happen. And then it's just a matter of what can they do this season. I mean, it really helps the fact that Kyrie Irving disappears, and then all of a sudden old mate Cam Thomas pops up with back-to-back 40-point games, and he's looking like a dude who can score at a high level. Brought in a couple of very good defenders. They might not be done. I fully think that Sean Marks will at least be exploring further moves as we speak, as we say this, as people are listening to this. He might well be on the phone to someone else thinking about some other ideas, but they're a worse team without Kyrie Irving, but they're not that much worse of a team. And when they were at their peak, they were really, really good for a couple of weeks there. I'm pretty curious to see what they do the rest of the way. And it might well be one of those things where your team has less talent, but maybe they're just more cohesive now and therefore play better overall as a unit, you know?
I think they're a much better team because I think they are kind of returning to the low-key Nets we saw as Sean Marks started in that job, like as low-key as you can be with Kevin Durant, but you kind of just want to sit in the background, let your culture, let your development process do the mahi, and then you come out on the other end. We are from the Niche Cache, the niche-cache.com, home of in-depth Aotearoa sporting yarn, and we also love to have a chat and a kōrero about Aotearoa sport as well. We've got plenty of Kiwi sporting notes and information on our website, the niche-cache.com right now. Check it out, tune in, tap in daily, although that is a bit excessive. Like, you don't need to check into any website daily. Chill out, get off your phone, get away from the screen, but maybe every couple of days, because that's our cycle, that's our grind. We're always here serving it up, and you can check in every couple of days to enjoy some Aotearoa sporting information. There are a couple of ways to support the Niche Cache and all our content directly. You can make a one-off donation via Buy Me a Coffee, or you can sign up to a membership with Buy Me a Coffee. You can sign up to a membership via Patreon, patreon.com/Our Niche Cache, Buy Me a Coffee /The Niche Cache. And then you get access to the extra podcast every week, as well as supporting our content directly straight up the guts. You can also sign up to the Monday and Friday email newsletter as well, which is all sorts of other Aotearoa sporting information, especially newsy bits and pieces, current events, and all sorts of stuff like that. For example, tomorrow's the Friday email newsletter. Might touch on this New Zealand 11 versus England game, because I don't know where to put those yarns. I'm not going to do an in-depth yarn about that game, so I might just chuck it in the email. Might chuck some SG Ball notes. So I'm not doing a big in-depth yarn about SG Ball, but I might just chuck it into that email newsletter. What are you thinking? What are you cooking up for that Friday email newsletter?
We'll have to wait and see. I had a few ideas, but I'm not entirely sure which stuff will end up being full articles and which stuff will be what do you call it, email notes. So I don't know. In recent times, I've written a couple breakers things. I've always tended to find some flying Kiwis yarns to go in there. I had something as well that I wrote down, but I haven't got my notes on me at the moment. So I'm sorry, I can't. I'll have to disappoint you on that front, and people get the surprise package in the email tomorrow.
You always disappoint the old email newsletter teas, but it's all good because we just keep it
Yeah,
real. You're just a couple of humble Kiwis. We're not necessarily the
yeah,
plug central, but we're out here. And those email newsletters are pretty good value if you do say so. Myself and ourselves, thenichecase.substack.com. And the Substack also has a paid subscription section. So then you can get access to that Patreon podcast. The Patreon podcast this week was a deep dive into Black Caps versus England Test cricket. And every week we record that podcast, then we chuck it out to any of the paid membership zones. So whether it's Patreon, Substack, Buy Me a Coffee, however you want to do it, it's up to you. You can pick and choose. It's all good. And if you can't donate anything, if you can't offer any koha in terms of the subscription, donation, it's all good as well. Just jam the website, tell a friend. We appreciate the underground grassroots support that we do receive. So big up everyone listening and reading Niche Cache. Let's enter the Mindfulness portal.
Mindfulness portal, dipping into a bit of wisdom from ancient poet Rumi is where I've gone for today's effort. Quote, how useless to know the value of all things, but to know nothing of one's own worth.
That just hit me in the heart.
Hey.
I don't want to say like it was a knife because that's quite devilish, but it was fantastic.
Or yeah, it's a kind of version of that. Whatever the positive version of being stabbed in the heart is.
A violet arrow. It is quite a simple idea. Like a lot of people, we place value in items. We place value in all this external stuff, and we never actually value ourselves, or we never think about how we value ourselves and our unique being. So big up for the mindfulness.
Reminds me a little bit of those, you know how you get people every now and then there'll be a survey and someone will cite it, like how the richest people are often the most depressed, or just at least somehow unfulfilled, in a way where everyone who doesn't have those kind of riches is thinking, if I had that money, I would be happy. Like I could do the things I want to do. I could buy the things I want to buy. I could acquire all these things that I would consider valuable, which I know the worth of because I've been sitting here focusing on those things instead. But then the people who actually have that kind of wealth and value are often miserable because they also thought they would be fulfilled when they had everything, and they have everything and have ignored themselves the whole way to get to that point and realize that there's kind of no self left, and you're staring directly at the void because you no longer have that sort of aspirational dream. Well, if I only had that, I would be fulfilled. Well, I've got it and I'm not fulfilled, so something went wrong. Something got lost in translation there.
These are epic Aotearoa sporting times, and I've got a couple of things I want to roll through quickly before we open it up, really stretch out the legs and get into White Ferns, Breakers, Wellington Phoenix, and Flying Kiwis. And given how this podcast has started, and given maybe just the magical times that we're in, the only way you can view a summer full of rain is magic. And I went to check old Shane Young, UFC fighter from City Kickboxing. I had a little opened UFC stats just to check in the numbers, the digits, the statistics about his matchup at UFC Perth with Blake Builder. Shout out him. Blake Builder. There's a bunch of stats here. And then I just see Shane Young, average fight time, 11 minutes and 11 seconds. Shane Young, 11-11. So praise Jah. And if you're listening to this, love yourself, be aware of yourself, value yourself, because it's all just magical vibes around here. That is to say, there is a UFC event this weekend and Shane Young is fighting. This is the UFC 284, Islam Makhachev versus Alex Volkanovski. And Shane Young is quite an interesting way to view this UFC event from a city kickboxing perspective, because Shane Young's been off the radar a wee bit, had a couple of losses. He's deeper down the depth chart of city kickboxing, and he's kind of struggled over the past few years just to tap into his potential maybe, or like really rise up the UFC ranks. But he's back and he's fighting Blake Builder, and it's cool. He's in the featherweight division, and it's going to be fun to watch him fighting on that UFC card in Perth. Having watched a few interviews with Eugene Behrman and absorbing his wisdom, he's also done a lot of hard work along with the city kickboxing coaching staff to be there with Shane Young, to support Shane Young, to get Shane Young back into this point where he's trying to have a decent crack at his UFC career. And yeah, of course, Shane Young's in the octagon. He's the dude scrapping out Blake Builder. So it's all him. At the end of the day, it's all him. But I also think the city kickboxing coaching levels are going to be evident in Shane Young's performance. And this is an interesting way to view the main event as well, because Alex Volkanovski has taken on Islam Makhachev. Volkanovski is moving up a weight division against I just think he's one of the straight up best fighters in the world. And for Volkanovski to win that fight, Eugene Behrman and Joe Lopez, as part of the Volkanovski coaching team, are going to have some tricks. They're going to have to do some impressive stuff to really challenge Makhachev, because Makhachev just steamrolls all of his opponents with that Dagestani Khabib Nurmagomedov style of fighting. So I think it's just a really interesting time to observe city kickboxing. First major event of 2023, and you've got two fighters under the city kickboxing umbrella, the wider umbrella. Both are very talented. Both are going to try to put on their best performance, but I'm really interested in how the city kickboxing coaching looks in those two fighters. Shane Young just trying to get him back on track in the UFC and mentoring him. And then you've got Volkanovski, which is going to be a tactical duel, and two of the smartest MMA camps in the world. So really excited for that event.
I did a quick search to see how to spell what's his first name? Blake Builder. Just to check whether there was a U in Builder or not. There isn't. But the obvious joke to make would be how back in the day Joseph Parker used to fight like a bunch of Blake Plumbers and Blake Sparkies and whatnot in his early career. This is Blake Builder without a U, so we're talking a lot more. He actually has a unbeaten record as well, doesn't he? Looking at this, he's 8 fights, 7 wins, and a draw. So this is Shane Young, 13-6. Nice one. Is there there was because the Adesanya's next fight is on the periphery as well. That's scheduled in. Is it one of those like? So it feels like the city kickboxing lads have been out of the picture a little bit. I guess just quiet times in general in UFC. When's that Adesanya fight? Like, are we swinging back around to busy times again? Because there's guaranteed to be a few blokes on the undercard of that as well. And there's Shane Young fighting here, Volkanovski, of course, Aussie, but CKB still.
You've got the Adesanya Pereira rematch that is coming up. I'm not sure about the dates, like one day at a time here, you know? Yeah. Oh, don't worry. We got to keep it moving one day at a time. And Dan Hooker's also coming up against Jalen Turner. So they are on 2 separate events, right. And then you will have other city kickboxing fighters probably on those undercards, but you've got Hooker on one event and you've got Adesanya on another event within the next 2 to 3 months. So unless you got those dates right there.
Yeah, April 9th is Adesanya rematch.
Boom. We do need to keep it moving because we've got a lot of Aotearoa sport here on off, and I do also want to just highlight some of the Warriors stuff we're seeing with Teamless. I've done a Kiwi NRL notebook for the first round of trials, so you can check out all the Kiwi NRL wrinkles and all the trial teams. Got the All-Stars game in Rotorua, which I think is fantastic. There's not much to cover there from my perspective, but instead of complaining about all the big donnies pulling out, why don't we just celebrate all these young Māori men who are getting an opportunity to represent the Māori All-Stars, because those dudes are excellent. All the Kiwi NRL talent is excellent, and you're going to see a lot of that talent, the young talent, on display in that Māori All-Stars team. Warriors trial, yeah, that is to say you've got plenty of Kiwi NRL content on the website, theniche-case.com. Warriors team, this is interesting because you've got some extra players named. We've got all the youngsters we know and love. Tom Ale is starting at prop. Dimitris Sifakula, he's starting on an edge, which is interesting because he played middle for Warriors Redcliffe last year. Zion Ma'u'u is off the bench. Ali Leotawa's off the bench. Jacob Laban's off the bench. Those are the main crux of Warriors juniors we've been tracking throughout that Redcliffe phase. Then you've got all these players who are outside the top 30. They're like on like part-time New South Wales contracts, cup contracts maybe. Who knows? Because it's the NRL, we know nothing. Michael Seo is starting at lock. I think he did play for the Warriors under-20s at some point. Then he went over to Queensland Cup and he's been playing 5 seasons for North Devils. And he's starting at lock, so that's good for him. You've got Sanele Okusatino. He is from Wellington, St. Pat's Silverstream, and he returns to Aotearoa from the Sea Eagles. He was playing Sea Eagles under-21s, I think, last year. Moala Graham Taufa, along with his twin brother Lani Graham Taufa, they were recruited by the Roosters. Moala returned to Aotearoa, and Lani, I think, has moved to the Eels. And now Moala's wound up in the Warriors wider mixer. Shout out to him. I think he did play for Akarana in the New Zealand Rugby League Premiership last year as well. Keilani Going, he's from Northland, part of the illustrious Going whānau. He spent time with the Raiders. He returns. He was playing rugby union for Northland and part of their wider squad last year. Eden Ackland, he was with the Sea Eagles last year, returned halfway during the season to play Premier Footy in Auckland. Isaiah Wagner has been in the Warriors system since at least 2019. Didn't play in part of the Redcliffe stuff, but he's still there with the Warriors. So he's a very talented big bopper. Solomon Vasuvulangi, he spent time with the Cowboys system, returned to Auckland. Another big bopper, he's there. Paul Roach, younger brother of Nathaniel Roach. He left First 15 Rugby with Mags, and he made a few NZ Rugby Union rep teams. Then he went to the Raiders, returned from the Raiders, and he was playing Rugby Union for Ponsonby, and then I think he switched back to League, also with the Warriors. So plenty of funky stuff happening in the Warriors depth. And I'm also liking the look of this SG Ball team, as well as all the Kiwi NRL lads in the SG Ball. Warriors host the Manly Sea Eagles at Pukekohe on Sunday. It's a very interesting Warriors team because I think they're really good. And the big boppers like Tanistella Smith, Harry Durbin, Salu Halasima, fantastic middle forwards. Ben Penny returns, and he's been in a bunch of rep teams as well. Ben Penny, Papatoe Jr., big up. I think that group of middle forwards is as good as any other group of SG Ball middle forwards. Etuati Fukafuka had a fantastic highlight try. All the backs, like the halves, are big body halves who can kick, who can pass, who can run. And we know Warriors love an outside back. Raphael Seo Kali, exceptional wingers straight off the prototypical Warriors production line.
Just thinking like forecasting towards the actual NRL season, what sort of, because that's a lot of depth right there. Like that's a lot of players that you just rolled through. It's a large select, and not all of them will end up on a. In fact, most of them won't end up getting close to the NRL season, the NRL squad this season at least. Some of them potentially never will. That's just kind of how it goes with things. But where are the positions in the Warriors senior squad? And obviously there's a new coach, there's new players, so it's a little bit speculative. We don't know for certain. There might be ideas we're not privy to yet, but where are the positions in the squad where you think they might be needing to dip into a little bit more of this depth, like the sort of weak spots where there's a bit of room maybe for a younger fella or an up and comer to squeeze into the side at some point throughout the season.
I think you might see the SG Ball hooker Fuka, like his pedigree, his junior pedigree, first 15 halfback for St. Peter's, won a championship, I think, made some NZ rep teams. He could progress into the New South Wales Cup system later in the year, and that might boost their hooking department because they let Taniela Otakulo go. Obviously, they weren't too fussed about letting Otakulo go because you've also might have Fuka in the mix there. So that's a handy one, although like I don't necessarily view it as like they need a position. They just need the constant supply of talent.
Yeah, right.
Because that's how you manage your salary cap. That's how you rejig your whole club in a positive direction. And it's not having like, oh, we need a winger. No, you need 3 wingers competing for a spot. Oh, like maybe halves was the thing from the Redcliffe days, the Redcliffe era. Well, they've got 2 starting halves in the SG Ball team. And they're probably going to have Luke Metcalf and Ronald Volkman as the starting halves in New South Wales Cup. So at least now we've got our starting NRL halves, we've got 2 starting New South Wales Cup halves, and we've got 2 starting SG Ball halves. So like there is your production line of depth. Whereas the Redcliffe days, it was like the Warriors don't have a second, like an up and coming half because Redcliffe want those spots, like it was just a bit tricky. But I think the Warriors just having that talent flowing through is the most important thing. And the best way to learn about this is how they recruit and following their recruitment of Australian dudes. That's why I think they signed Mitch Barnett, why they signed Marata Niokore, and Jackson Ford even, because the likes of Zion Maiu, Jacob Laban, Dimitri Sifakula all play the same positions, but the young dudes on the rise. And you just want some solid NRL pros to hold down the standard until they are ready. So you can tell by the Warriors' recruitment moves how they view their up-and-coming talent, perhaps.
Right on. What's next on the agenda?
Let's get into some cricket.
Yeah, let's do that.
So right now we've got the men's Super Smash elimination final, Northern versus Otago. That is happening as we speak. And then obviously later on, we've got the women's elimination final. Canterbury men are already in the grand final. Wellington women already in the grand final. Won't talk about Super Smash today. Got lots of content on the website, theniche-case.com. All your Super Smash content can be found there. Chill out. It's all good. Go read about it. Black Caps, they're kicking back. Don't need to whip up that hype just yet, although we do have a full-on Patreon podcast deep diving that test series against England. So if you want a bit of that information, that is there available on the Patreon, Substack, and Buy Me a Coffee memberships. We did have the New Zealand 11. They played the first day against England, tour game, day-nighter. England do what England does and just smacked it to all parts. Kyle Jamieson was the best bowler, took 3 wickets, only New Zealand bowler to concede less than 4 RPO. Just quickly, one insight takeaway you have from your experience watching that New Zealand 11 day-night warm-up game against England?
The fact it was a day-night warm-up game caught me by surprise when I saw that they hadn't started till 2:00, and I was like, well, I guess it rained in Hamilton. I don't know. It was bright sunny where I was, but admittedly, 5 hours up the road still. I guess the obvious one is that if you thought England were going to approach the series any different than they have their other ones, if anything, they're leaning further into the just like hit crazy boundaries over and over. There's this shot that I saw of a few people sharing of Joe Root doing that shot that Joe Root really loves now. Like it's just really becoming a bit of a trademark thing of him, is like the sort of scoop over the slip cordon where he sort of reverse flips that thing over there. But also, I think to keep it in context, as you said, like Carl Jamieson took 3 wickets. He had the best bowling figures. Someone else got 3 for in that series.
Jared
You'll know
Mackay.
who. There you go. He's a CD dude, isn't he? Okay,
I
I
he
think.
left CD and he's with Otago now.
Right, there you go. Yeah, so but that also helps paint the picture of what I was going to say. Is like Kyle Jamieson took 3 for, had the best equal most wickets and the best economy by almost a full run. Like I think he was zero 0.8 better than anyone else or something like that. That's Kyle Jamieson is in the testing. Kyle Jamieson is going to be playing against them at Maunganui in in a week's time or whatever it is. Sean Davey, old mate Mackay, Aditya Ashok, whoever else was bowling, Theo Van Burkham got a few overs in there. Like there's someone
Sean
else I'm missing as well. Sean Solia, there you go.
Malo.
These guys are not going to be in the test squad. These guys are not currently playing Super Smash eliminator finals or preparing for a final or Ford Trophy or whatever's going on for their particular franchises right now. This is very much a collection type 11. This isn't New Zealand A. This is just an 11 of players who are available. For some reason, Kyle Jamieson's in the middle of it. I guess just building up his reps. But Will Young is also playing, also building up his reps. This is like it's England's full strength touring team. They didn't bring over a second 11 to play the tour game. That's not how these things work. England picked their best players, chucked them out there and said, go have some fun in a day-night warm-up game. And they did. They scored 460 odd at 6.5 and over in the completed innings. But they were playing against a bowling lineup that was considerably below what they'll be facing in the test series. And that's probably an important factor to note. The one thing that I might see some contrast in is, the Jamieson factor, obviously, but the fact Jamieson did well is good. That shows like the best bowler is the one who's going to be playing the test matches. There you go. Like automatically that tells you that it will be a slightly different story there. And his 3 wickets, I noticed, all caught behind the wicket, all edges to sort of first or second slip, which is also, I suspect, a very good sign. It's a good sign for any fast bowler, really, when you're getting edges caught in the slip cordon. And the one thing is, I think Aditya Ashok's figures, like 1 for 81, I think it was, of 9 overs.
9.11 RPO.
Yeah, it looks terrible. There was 1 over where Harry Brook, he bowled a dot ball in the first ball and Harry Brook hit the next 5 balls in a row for 6. So that obviously blew things out a bit. But I do wonder if that maybe affects the way they consider the spin bowling thing, because he's a leg spinner. Isodi's a leg spinner. Isodi's a very different type of leg spinner, though, because he's more of a bounce, whereas Ashok's a bit skiddier. And also much less experienced and hadn't bowled to guys of this level before. I wonder if that'll be a factor. I also wonder if it might actually, if the fact they're going after him, you think, well, we have a leg spinner who's going to get more bounce, more likely, therefore, to get those top edges that go straight up rather than, and when I say straight up, I mean actually straight up rather than the commentary standard of straight up, which goes for 6. That might be something where you think, well, if they're going to bet like a 2020 thing, we'll pick our best 2020 wicket-taking spinner. Like, why not? So there's some factors in there. I'm starting to lean towards, I still think they're more likely to pick Michael Bracewell than Ish Sodhi, and I don't see them picking 2. They might do, but I don't necessarily expect it. I'm kind of leaning towards, well, if they're going to be so aggressive, let's pick Ish Sodhi as our top spinner and not pick Michael Bracewell. Just put Sodhi in that spot. See how it goes. I'd be curious to see that happen. And the problem is we don't really, this is Tim Southee's first home test as captain. We don't actually know what his idea on spin bowling in these conditions is going to be. So it'll be informative for all of us, I suppose. I did see him hanging out with Brendan McCullum and Ben Stokes and those fellas on the sideline of that game. So he's paying close attention.
The most important cricket thing is, however, the White Ferns. We got White Ferns starting their T20 World Cup, and they are playing on Sunday morning against Australia. Banger to start the T20 World Cup for the White Ferns. Then they play South Africa on Tuesday morning. Probably their 2 hardest games. First 2 games don't know if they'll beat Australia. Not expecting a victory over Australia, and I'm also there, like, I'm trying to be real positive and optimistic about the White Ferns. Got to be realistic any time you're playing Australia. Got to keep it a buck, keep it a full steak and cheese. Probably won't win that game, but there's also not. I haven't gained confidence from the warm-up games. Let me say that. Warm-up games, so not every batter has batted twice, but just looking at some of their warm-up game stats, only one batter, Maddie Green, scored over 100 strike rate. Bernadine Bezenhut, she returns to the White Ferns after a break for a while. She scored 3 runs in 2 games. Georgia Plymmer, the best batter at the Under-19 World Cup, she scored 12 runs in 2 games. Strike rates below 65. Like, I'm not full of confidence about the White Ferns and their batting oomph right now. Sophie Devine, a bit healthier, she might help that setup. And then you've got some other stuff like Hannah Rowe only bowled 1 over. She went for 19 runs off her 1 over in the 2 warm-up games. Leah Tahuhu didn't take a wicket. Fran Jonas, only 1 wicket. Eden Carson, only 1 wicket. Jess Kerr, no wickets at 9 RPO. Like, these are warm-up games, but all of the White Ferns stats don't give me more confidence. They kind of just help me settle in that realistic spot where I'm just like, if things go well, they can win the World Cup. What we know about the White Ferns at World Cups recently, things don't go well. And that's the unfortunate truth. So I'm just fascinated to see how that plays out. I think Australia lost to Ireland overnight in a warm-up game. So who knows? You might be able to do something crazy there.
Yeah, looking at the format, there's 10 teams at the World Cup, and there's 2 groups of 5. So you get 4 group stage games, but then it's straight through to semi-finals. And if the White Ferns aren't carrying the best form into the tournament, that's going to be a rude awakening against Australia, no matter what Australia got up to in warm-up activities. But even more so, playing South Africa second, they're going to need to get something from one of those 2 games. There are other teams that they face, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and they don't play themselves, obviously. So Bangladesh and Sri Lanka are the other 2 teams in their group. Presumably, they should beat Bangladesh and Sri Lanka. Like, they should get victories there. But it might be too little too late if they've already lost to Australia and South Africa. So South Africa feels like the tricky one because, I mean, you don't need to finish first ahead of Australia. Australia's really good. They'll probably beat us. They always win these things. They have the best women's cricket team on the planet. South Africa, not at full strength, lost a couple players in some controversial circumstances recently from their selection dramas. But they are the hosts of this tournament, aren't they? And you gotta, I mean, if it was being played in New Zealand, I would back the White Ferns to probably beat the South African team. However, I don't think that's how it went at the. Can't remember if they played them at the ODI World Cup, and they did host it. I think they lost that game though. So there you go. So it's not the best, different formats, but still. But yeah, that's tricky because that's a massive win. That's basically gonna be like, if they don't beat South Africa in that game, it's gonna be very, very, very hard and beyond their control whether they make the semi-finals. If they do beat South Africa in that game, it's all in their control. They just have to win the other 2 games against teams they will expect to beat. But that's a tough draw, and they're going to have to start this tournament well because their 2 crucial games are in the first two matches they'll play. Like, these warm-up games have got to get you warmed up because there's no other chance.
My issue with the White Ferns is that I've seen a lot of their issues before that I think are present in what they're trying to do at this World Cup. For example, I've seen Brooke Halliday score 20 runs a lot for the White Ferns, which is great. But she never kicks on, and she usually is there to salvage an innings, but she can't get a 50. And like Lauren Down, to some extent Georgia Plymmer, to some extent Bezenhut, they don't have the foundation of domestic dominance. And like Brooke Halliday, her 20s aren't coming off 15 balls, right? Those aren't like T20 pinch hitter situations. And I'm just being deep in the mangroves for women's cricket, these players don't dominate the domestic circuit. And it's hard to see how they can then carry confidence and mana into the White Ferns and their performances there. And if they don't, like, if they're not in form ahead of the World Cup, I'm not excited about what they're going to do at the World Cup. Like, there's not necessarily a reason to be like fizzing with expectation and optimism about Lauren Down, the T20 White Ferns batter. Even Brooke Halliday, Plym is really like a talented young batter. I don't know if she is a certified international consistent performer yet. Same with Bezenhouden, who's been in and out of the White Ferns. So that's all interesting. And then, like, I don't know, Molly Penfold didn't bowl in the warm-up games. And I rolled through some stats ahead of the elimination finals. Gabby Sullivan, Emma Black, Missy Banks, they all average below 20 or early 20s in Super Smash. Molly Penfold, the White Ferns T20 World Cup bowler, averages over 40. So I don't know if she's like, if she is being saved for these World Cup games so other teams can't get the footage on her and that type of stuff, or if she's just not even in the mix. And if she's not in the mix, it's like, what's the point? You might have, like, Lee Kasparek might be more, she might contribute more to this team or something. I don't know, but it's just a bit weird. Especially Amelia Kerr, she took 5 wickets in those warm-up games, not many wickets from other bowlers. And I don't know if Amelia Kerr is going to be the best bowler in the T20 World Cup, because she, again, having followed it for a few years now, she is a far better batter than she is an international bowler, which says a lot about her development and her growth as an international cricketer. But I would love to have seen Eden Carson, Fran Jonas, Jess Kerr, Hannah Rowe gathering some wickets in these warm-up games to build their confidence. It's like there's nothing from those warm-up games or the past this summer, because like Lauren Down wasn't scoring Super Smash runs. So it's like there is now, like, let's all brush aside the previous White Ferns situation, which the World Cup stuff definitely plays into this World Cup, but just from the past 6 months, even less 4 months, there isn't exactly a reason to be like, yo, the White Ferns are out to win this T20 World Cup. Like, I'm not getting the signs and signals from their performances to suggest that, or the squad selection for this World Cup either. So I would like them to win the T20 World Cup. I think they can win the World Cup if the stars align, but there's not much foundation. There's not many foundations of like evidence and fact or vibe to suggest they will.
Well, you might find a few of the batters might be averaging 11.11 or something like that, which would be at least a nice sign, even though that's actually a crap batting average. But still, maybe if a bowler could do that, you'd suddenly. If Amelia Kerr averages 11.11 with the ball during the course of this World Cup, White Ferns will be in a position to at least make the semi-finals, if not go further. But yeah, we'll see how that goes.
Hannah Rowe does have 11 runs and a high score of 11 and an average of 11. So at least there's like a couple of 11s in the stat chart. So I don't know what that means, but I know what I love about Super Smash cricket. And I know who my favorite Super Smash batter is. And that's Kartine Clark, who has started the elimination final with 46 runs off 18 deliveries, 4 sixes, 4 fours, strike rate of 255. Tim Seifert's
really
also
careful.
going...
He might get called up for the English Test team.
There you go. Tim Seifert's also having a crack, so good to see the Northern batters slugging boundaries early in the Super Smash Elimination Finals. Basketball is here. Breakers. They're in the finals. We know that the Breakers have I think it's a championship bandwagon. I asked you that question in the variety show, and I think the fact that the Breakers have previously won championships, they've got that championship mana. Throughout the season, they've shown championship credentials with their defense and just their attacking skill sets, being able to shoot the three, get baskets inside, just well-rounded basketball. I wonder if there's like a term the basketball team folks use, like footy. Because ball doesn't really do it for me, but
hooping.
Yeah, hooping. Hoops. Yeah, they're playing good hoops. Yeah, good footy, good hoops. I like that. So the Breakers, I believe, do have some championship mana, so I think it is a championship bandwagon. As we know, Black Caps haven't actually won any championships. World Test Championships?
They won one. They won one.
Shut up.
The most prestigious format of all. Yeah,
that's for damn sure. Praise Jah. We don't know who the Breakers are going to play, but they start. Is it a series they start on Sunday? Yes.
Yeah.
A 3-bank.
Yeah. So best of 3. So they're playing games tonight, and that's 3 versus 4 on the standings, and 5 versus 6. So the winner of 3 versus 4, which is Cairns Taipans versus Tasmania Jack Jumpers, winner of that plays the Breakers in a series which starts on Sunday. I think it goes Sunday, Thursday, Sunday. It's something like that. The loser of 3 versus 4 plays the winner of 5 versus 6, and whoever wins that second game plays the Sydney Kings, who finished first in the other semi-final, which I don't know when that starts, but it'll Wednesday. They go Wednesday, Friday, Sunday.
Based on your knowledge of the Breakers, how confident are you heading into this first final series? Like you listed off their possible opponents there. I'm not sure if you know much about those opponents, but just where are your confidence levels? Basically the same thing with the White Ferns. Like, maybe a better way of setting this up is the Breakers have shown reason to be optimistic and excited, and they have laid foundations for sensible hype, maybe is a good way of saying it. Sensible hype. The White Ferns don't necessarily have those foundations of sensible hype. I think the Breakers do. What are elements of that sensible hype for yourself?
Best defense in the competition would be right up there. And as you know, there's you get to finals basketball, everything becomes more condensed, and it becomes more like every play matters and all these kind of things. Well, that's the mentality you have already as the best defensive team. So the only trick there is if other teams try harder and then close that gap towards the Breakers' biggest advantage might be a risk, but that's assuming that the Breakers don't have any further to go. And I would suggest very strongly that they do, because if you watch their last couple of games, even though they were playing weaker teams, big halftime deficits. And that's not really where they should have been. And either time, they're down like double figures at halftime against Browie. One was Brisbane and one was Illawarra before that. They came back and won both of those games with big third quarters. First of all, big third quarters defensively, limiting the other team suddenly, like making those adjustments, but also suddenly figuring out how to score themselves. And there was a stretch there where they lost a few games in a row, cost them an opportunity really to play for first spot on the ladder. Don't know that makes that much difference, or will when you come to the final and Sydney Kings have got the home court advantage should the games progress with the top seeds winning all their games. That was a little bit of a down, just a stumble. It wasn't. They were playing some little bit of ugly basketball. They were getting themselves into the same holes as they were the last couple of games, but not being able to dig themselves out. And the main reason for that was because Barry Brown Jr. was injured. Barry Brown Jr. comes back. They've won 5 in a row. I'm not sure if that lines up entirely perfectly with his return. I can't remember. They might have won 1 before he came back. I don't know. But they won 5 games in a row leading into the finals. That's good form. And there wasn't always like there's stuff to improve within there. There's stuff they won't be taking those bad first halves for granted. Like they will be trying to fix those. But also they've shown the ability to get out of that. So they know they can come back from a deficit. They know they've got a team that can defend extremely well throughout. Barry Brown Jr. just announced as the sixth man of the year in the awards the other day. Modi Mayor ripped off, in my opinion, not winning the coach of the year. They gave it to the Sydney Kings dude, who's done a very good job coaching the best team in the competition. But also they were the defending champs. As much as they had to rebuild with some new imports, so do the Breakers. The Breakers had to get new imports where they didn't have good imports before. Now they do. I'm a little bit surprised that you can go from the worst team by a mile in the competition to the second best, only one game off first, and that's not the best coaching example in the season, but so it goes. I can't remember who won Defensive Player of the Year, if it was Derek Pardon or not. I don't think I actually checked that, but the awards aren't that important because, especially when it comes to defending, that is really a team sport. Like you have to be all five guys on the court contributing to that. And the Breakers have the best team defense. So regardless, I think Pardon must have won that. I can't think of anyone would have been more. I know Pardon and Brantley both got named second team. And I kind of like that. The fact the Breakers had two dudes in the second team All NBL, no one in the first team All NBL. I kind of think that's a positive thing for the Breakers, for this specific version of the Breakers at least, because it tells you this is a team with no superstar, but with very highly performing players all throughout. That kind of, for the team playing with the version of themselves that they are, as this defensive lockdown sort of side who can grind out results, whether they're down by 10 at halftime or not. I kind of think that's quite telling. No one in the first, in the All-Star 5. And yeah, I mean, add those things together. Oh, one other factor actually as well is that they did win the season series, I think 2-1 over Cairns. They did lose their most recent game against Cairns. That was during that little slump that I mentioned. I'll check what they've done against the Jack Jumpers. They won 71-65 at home very early on, won 94-62 at home back in October, and then beat them 84-76 away in November. So they haven't played them for a while. So it's a little bit, that was still where the Breakers were sort of, we weren't quite sure if the bubble was going to burst kind of thing early on in the season, all their games against Tasmania. I think Cairns will beat Tasmania, so I think it's a moot point. But they won 3 out of 3 against them. I assume they didn't play them a fourth time. They could have. They did, and they lost actually on Boxing Day, 93-82. So they won 3-1 series over the series against Tasmania, and they 2-1 over the series against Cairns, winning records against both the potential teams they might face. They've won 5 in a row. They have the best defense, and we know that defense comes into even more prominence when you get to the playoffs. They've got dudes in form within the fact that the team's doing well. You got Barry Brown, you got Will McDowell-White's had a couple really good games lately. Isaiah Leafa's been playing quite well. Like Tom Abercrombie now is fit, which wasn't the case at the very start of the season, and he's at least given them very good defensive and veteran minutes. I think they're probably not using him quite as much as a scorer as they could, although I'd have to check because it doesn't really feel like his shooting stats have been quite on par with what they have been in previous seasons. But still, like a valuable leader out there at all times. They're just in a really good position heading into the finals. Like it's kind of everything you want. You're playing teams that you can beat. You're healthy. There's no major injuries on the team at the moment. You've won 5 games in a row. You've just been recognized at the awards in a few main categories, which shows that the rest of the league has got this respect that you've earned. Like this is exactly where you want to be heading into a final series, right? They've got home court advantage is the other thing against whoever they play. It may or may not be the case for the final if they should advance, but it would definitely be the case for the semis. First game 1 at home and game 3 at home, which is massive. It's good value heading into the finals. I don't know what more they could hope for. It's just a matter of everything you've done so far this season has led up to this point. Now you go and try to take advantage, because if they don't and they lose, then suddenly the rest of the season is put in a slightly different light. But I mean, I'm quite confident about how they should fare in the semis. I think the Sydney Kings are a better team. So if they go through and face them in the finals and lose, so it goes. That's, you can't complain if you get beaten by a better side. Um, but I definitely think they've got everything it takes to make it to that final, regardless of whether they play Cairns or whether they play Tasmania. Tasmania, no Kiwis on the roster, so don't care about them. Cairns do have Sam Wardenberg, though. And Sam Wardenberg, as a rookie, NBL rookie, coming off his time in the States doing his college ball thing, he got amongst those awards too. I wasn't sure if he was going to, because he used to be Rookie of the Year. And then randomly, like a month before the voting stuff started happening, they decided to change that award. So it's no longer Rookie of the Year, and it now became Next Generation Player, which meant they included anyone under a certain age, like under like 24 or younger or something like that, which means players could be in like their third or fourth year and still be nominated for that award. I don't think it couldn't be 24. I can't remember what the age thing was, but Wardenberg was clearly the best rookie. But then they opened it up to other players, and suddenly it's a bit of a like, oh, I don't know, is he still gonna? But he did. He won Next Generation Awards. So there you go. He actually, straight after the voting finished, he had his best game of the season as well. He scored 26. He did some ball handling stuff. Just looking excellent. And if Cairns progress tonight against Tasmania, I expect Wardenberg to be a pretty significant factor in that, and it'll be quite fun to see him against the Breakers as well, because it should just be something to watch from the other side as well, as the up and coming Kiwi lad, who's no doubt going to be a prominent part of Tall Black squads for the next several years.
Who is your favorite Breakers player that you'll just be keeping a close eye on throughout those games?
My favorite Kiwi NBL player, full stop, is Shaylee, because I wrote a big deep dive on him last season after his best campaign yet. And he had a trouble season with injuries and concussions and stuff this year, so he wasn't quite. I still got nominated for Defensive Player of the Year despite only playing half a season. But because Shaylee is my favorite overall player in this league, I kind of have to pick Isaiah Leafa, who I think is just the mirror image, but not quite as good. But still, like the let's call him the, what do they call it in ag? Like the understudy, the Shaylee understudy. He's the dude. If Shaylee gets sick and can't do his Broadway performance tonight, then Isaiah Leafa would be the dude who steps up and takes his place, kind of thing. He's almost the same player. He's like, especially the way they've developed. Like Shaylee didn't always have a jump shot that was as good as it is now. Leafa's been a little bit more consistent, but now the way they do that, like both of those dudes can knock down a 3-pointer. Both of them are not overly tall point guards, probably relatively short point guards for the thing. Both of them can also play shooting guard or whatever. I think Leafa plays a lot more shooting guard specifically, but that's the mix of the team as much as anything. The main point there is like similar build, similar profile in terms of how they score their points, both get to the rim and finish nicely, quick, but especially each of them absolutely insane on-ball defenders. Like if you're the dude carrying the ball up and one of these dudes is on you, you're in for a torrid time. Like that's what they do especially well. So, and in respect to Shaylee, I'm also going Isaiah Leafa, who's had a fantastic season as well for the Breakers. Like that's worked out so well, that signing. He's really contributed heaps towards what they've achieved this year, and I expect him to continue to do that throughout the playoffs as well.
Just want to big up Carton Clark, 50 of 24
Still going.
deliveries, I think it was. But he's got his 50. He's knocking around. Strike rate 216. Old Seifert's gone up to 190. So they're blazing during the niche cast. Love to see it. Let's wiggle on into football. And we'll start with Flying Kiwis. Who is there a... I always like to ask about the players, but I also like to ask about the pockets, the regions, the trends, the themes. Was there any of those, because that when we last checked in with this type of discussion, it was the Denmark
Yeah.
There was the Denmark situation. Is there something like that happening with the Flying Kiwis where you just see a lot of Kiwi footballers in one section of the world or one league or something like that?
Yeah, there is one because I scribbled down some players and I realized as you say that most of them all play in the same country. And it's not Denmark this time because the Danish thing has eased off a bit. Like Joe Bell lost his spot in the starting 11 for Brøndby, and Marko Stamenic has announced he's going to be leaving and going and signing with the best team in Serbia at the end of the year, Red Star Belgrade, which is a massive move for him. Like that's very exciting. And also his dad is Serbian, so like he himself is half Serbian. It gives him the opportunity to get a Serbian passport, so he gets to be counted as a local player, which as opposed to an international player, which obviously helps him getting into that team. And probably following us, similar trend to Marco Rojas going and playing in his father's home nation, and yeah, I'm sure there's one or two other examples out there as well. Libby Kakache would be another one, going and playing in Italy. There's a little bit of a trend of this recently. I don't think it's anything sentimental. Maybe a little bit more in Rojas's case, sentimental. I think it's more literally the logistics. It's just a lot easier to get if you're eligible for dual nationality. It's a lot easier to get signed in those countries, just from a logistical point of view. But the country where I think it seems like there's a lot of buzz going on right now, and it's a throwback to the old days. I think England, I think at the moment you've had Ben Waine going over there. Actually, Ben Waine, I think, has his family's English as well. So you can count him in that same category. Like Ben Waine signing with Plymouth. Chris Wood's just had a transfer to Nottingham Forest where he's likely to, at least in the short term, play a lot more often than he had been for Newcastle. So it could be a little bit of a resurgence for him. I'm absolutely loving the WSL stuff at the moment where I think CJ Bott is in career best form playing for Leicester City. And I keep putting out like tweets and stuff like this. She was highlighted on the Sky Sports broadcast last week as the player to watch from Leicester. And then there's like I can't remember who it was, but an ex-England international just raving about how good CJ Bott was last week. And I'm like, yeah, I tweeted a big thing about that too. I wrote heaps about it in Flying Kiwis, and it gets like a fraction of the likes and retweets that like Dalton Wilkins scoring from halfway in a friendly game got, like, which is still a great thing. It's just like, you see the same love for the footy Ferns players overseas as well, because CJ Bott is probably the informed Flying Kiwis player right now, the informed Kiwi footballer overseas. She's been absolutely brilliant the last couple of games for Leicester City. Rebecca Stott just played her first WSL game since the last time she was in Brighton before she had to leave because of her cancer diagnosis. And she was really good too. An Elite signed for Aston Villa, where she's in competition with Hannah Hampton, who was a backup goalkeeper in the England squad when they won the Euros. She's pretty much ousted Hannah Hampton as the number one there. Like, that's already an incredible achievement for an Elite as well, let alone the fact she's done it because she's been playing really well. She's looking very good there. As out currently with a minor back injury, I think has missed the last couple of games because of that. But hopefully doesn't sound too serious. Hopefully back this week. And then you dip down the divisions a little bit. Nick Sarnet's having a real good season with AFC Wimbledon, where I think he's kept the fifth most clean sheets in League Two, which is fourth tier. Also in fourth tier is another Kiwi goalkeeper, Max Crocombe, they played Luton Town in the FA Cup fifth round, or fourth round, whichever one it was. I think moving to progress into the fifth round. And Luton Town versus Grimsby Town sounds a lot like one of those lower league English football kind of matchups. I was surprised to see Luton Town are actually a top half of the championship, like second tier. They're actually having an incredible season themselves. Grimsby are down mid-table League Two. There was more than 50 places between them on the overall ladder when they met last week in the first. Well, it's not the first leg, but they drew and forced a replay. Then they went and smoked them 3-0 in the replay at home. Max Crocombe keeping a clean sheet against a team 2 divisions above him to advance into the thing. He's the last Kiwi left in the FA Cup this season. Incredible yarns there as well. Like, that's a major. I think they said that's the furthest Grimsby Town have advanced in the FA Cup since 1996. Max Crocombe being a big part of that. Like, it's it's a flashback to the old days when the only place Kiwi footballers could go overseas and get a contract was England, and there would only be maybe half a dozen maximum at the time. But that's I guess these things just swing in roundabouts because at the moment England has been a great place for people to go. Like you've also seen guys like Jesse Randall, Ollie Collodi going over for trials in England as well. I guess I don't know. I guess maybe it's a Brexit thing. Maybe it's a Brexit thing, and they can't sign South Americans anymore, so they've just gone back to signing New Zealanders with English parents. I don't know, but hey, if that's the case, it's working out fine for us.
I will take responsibility for the Wellington Phoenix losing to Melbourne Victory. Like it's just
okay. I was going to blame the defense, but if you want,
no, I'll take that one. You know, Melbourne Victory is shit, bottom of the ladder, all this stuff, not going to do anything. Obviously, Wellington Phoenix going to lose their game. It's all good. Live and learn. This week we got Wellington Phoenix against MacArthur. MacArthur are 9th, Wellington Phoenix are 5th. But what's happening with Wellington Phoenix women?
Away to Western Sydney 2 hours before. So it's another back-to-back. They're in different places. Once against Western Sydney, once against MacArthur. But they're 5 o'clock Sunday kickoff for the women, 7 p.m. Sunday kickoff for the blokes. So it's another one of them sort of, let's call it a TV doubleheader. It's not an actual doubleheader because they're in different stadiums, but it's a TV doubleheader. And Western Sydney as well, I should say, is a beatable team. They're only a couple of spots ahead of them on the ladder.
And you know, if Wellington Phoenix women had a bye last round, correct?
Yes. So
they have
had some time to rest up on a few of those injuries that are still in the squad is probably not the worst thing.
They had a win, they had a draw, they had a bye. So it's a great 3 weeks of Wellington Phoenix women's football. They face Western Sydney Wanderers have had a loss, a win, a loss in their last 3 games. Are you, again, is there sensible hype around that Wellington Phoenix women's game?
As in my own hype? Yeah, probably. I think because they drew with each other when they were both the last 2 winless teams left in the competition, and they drew, and it was a little bit before the Phoenix women realized how they were going to score goals, and they were still sort of working through that. But you could see the signs, you could see the progress as they were building towards it. It was probably like they were 1-0 up at halftime, but it was probably a fair result to the draw overall. Western Sydney then went and won a couple games in a row. Like I think their very next game, they beat the previously undefeated Western United, top of the table. Western United have been on a little bit of a slump recently. I think Jess McDonald's left. One of their imports has gone back because their NWSL preseason has now started. And they've been a little bit more vulnerable, which is tightening up the thing, as well as the top team started losing games and the bottom team, Phoenix women, started getting points themselves. So everything's starting to condense a little bit more. And Newcastle had a win over Western United last night, which is a pain in the ass because otherwise the Phoenix could have gone ahead of them if they had won on the weekend. But they are still only 5 points behind Newcastle with 2 games fewer having played. So 2 games in hand on Newcastle. Win both of those, which there's obviously no reason to expect them to do so because they are the bottom team of the ladder. But mathematically, they could finish above them if they all match points and they win the whatever. So there's that. They're starting to look like a team that can do some things. I mean, Western Sydney, as I say, they themselves, after the draw against the Phoenix, also got a lot better, won a couple games, but maybe might be slipping back down. Like that little burst of form maybe has eased off a bit with a couple more losses. And just since then, they do have Malia Steinmetz in the midfield playing very well for them, like just winning a lot of ball, distributing it nicely, pushing forward a bit more than we've seen from her in the past. She's having a really good season for the Wanderers. But they are a team that the Phoenix know they can get at because they drew with them last time they played them. And the way they played last game, way to Brisbane, the 3-3 draw, could have won it if that goal hadn't been disallowed late. Did see a wider angle replay where I actually thought Michaela Robertson did look slightly offside from that. So I won't say it was a travesty of a decision or anything like that. It was definitely close, but with no VAR, that might have been given, and that might have been allowed to stand, whether it was technically right or wrong. They also had that chance late on. I think Millie Clegg put one over the bar on a counter attack right at the very end in stoppage time. Like, they could have won that game. They played fantastically to come from a couple goals down and get a 3-3 draw, regardless of the fact that they could have won. Short turnaround, nightmare of travel schedule because of the floods and whatnot, and played. That was the game. Kate Taylor was sent off at the start as like 20, 30 minutes in or whatever it was. They played a lot of that with only 10 women in like 30-degree heat in Brisbane after some crap travel and probably not enough sleep. Like, incredible effort away from home there. If they can do that in Brisbane, then a much more comfortable thing coming off a bye week away to Western Sydney with a shorter flight, and it's probably conditions won't be quite so sweaty and hectic. There's no reason they can't beat Western Sydney away. Like, I don't think the away from home thing is nearly as much of a factor as it might have been at the start of the season. They're sure they can win that game for sure. I mean, I'm not saying they will, but I would say when I sit down to watch that game, I will be watching it with every expectation of a competitive game. And if it's a competitive game, Phoenix have proved in the last couple of games that they can score goals now. If you can score goals in a competitive game, you're always in with a chance. So there's absolutely a game they could win. I'm not saying will or should or anything like that, but it's definitely a game they could win.
Wellington Phoenix men, you referenced the defensive lapses against Melbourne victory.
Yeah, with Finn Sermon and Josh Laws at centre back as well. So Wooden was out, Payne was out, Ollie Sale made a couple of mistakes as well. But it comes with the territory when you back up defensive line.
Yeah. Well, I'm setting it up for you. We'll get there. Sure. I think the Wellington Phoenix attack, like, I've marveled at how they have absorbed the loss of Ben Waine, and I think they're a really good attacking team. The personnel they have in those positions is really good. I love a bit of the Clayton Lewis Ugarkovic combination, but a roofer in the midfield as well. The constant theme throughout the Wellington Phoenix season, especially from yourself deep in the mangroves, has been the defensive line, and specifically the centre backs, because I think Callan Elliott's been quite good on the right flank. You can go Maragas on the left.
Yeah, Lucas Maragas, yeah.
So, or the who's the young guy? Sam Sutton. He comes off the bench or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
He can play left back. But the wobbles have been the centre back pairing. So for this game against MacArthur, which is a very winnable game for the Phoenix, MacArthur's below them on the ladder. What are you looking at with that centre back combination as far as who plays, how they play in response to what you saw against Melbourne victory?
Yeah, well, let me just check how long Tim Payne's suspended for, because I know they appealed the. Oh, Christ. I Googled Tim Payne suspension, and it comes up with a bunch of Aussie cricket stuff. So I don't know. I can't be bothered doing that and talking through it. So if Tim Payne's back, then that helps everything. That's fine. That sorts things out. Experienced guy at the back. I can't remember if he is. I can't remember if it was a 1-game or a 2-game suspension. Anyway, like Finn Sermon and Josh Laws are two guys I like a lot as defenders. Sermon more so because I see him as someone who's going to grow a lot more into that role. A younger player. Captain the New Zealand under-19s last year, will be going to the under-20 World Cup, which I think overlaps with the end of the season, actually. So that might be a factor. But he's a young dude looking to find his place in the A-League. He's probably needs to be playing with an experienced guy like Wooden or Payne alongside him. Josh Laws is probably he was always a defensive midfielder who could play centre-back. But with the Phoenix, he's just been a centre-back. And it's nice to have the left-footed option, and he's good on the ball. But he also still feels like a second option. Like, he also needs an experienced guy next to him. So while they're two good players, it felt like that combination. And then also Callan Elliott and Lucas Moragas on at fullback, also real young dudes. So it felt like it just felt like it was a team lacking a little bit in leadership, and Ollie Sale picked a terrible time to have his worst game of the season as well. So hopefully none of those. I don't know if they'll be able to fix the back four necessarily. They might just have to hope for better performances, but you can expect Sale to be. He's not going to be making mistakes that lead to goals every week. He's far better than that. But they did sign Nico Boxall this week. They did add a bit of depth all weights talent into their squad. They had a spare local player spot in the squad that they hadn't used earlier on. They've brought in Nico Boxall now. He is coming off of a one official game stint with the Auckland City. Played at the Club World Cup games. He obviously played the pre-game things as well, which the Auckland City stats keepers always like to count those random friendly games as appearances. And they're the only ones that will tell you, like, this is so-and-so's 150th appearance for Auckland City. And, like, no one else is counting those things, but that's cool. I respect a club that pays attention to their own history. So Nico Boxall is a good addition. I don't see him as someone who's going to compete with Wooden or Payne for a full-time start, or probably even Laws for a full-time starting gig, but he's definitely filling an important gap in the squad right now when they're stretched for centre backs, because I don't know if Wooden's back this week, and if he's not back this week, I don't know when exactly he's supposed to be back, but they've definitely missed him. Like, it's not been quite the same without their one import defensive player. All their other imports are attacking players. The other player they've missed a lot, and it's not in the defensive line, but since Clayton Lewis missed last game with injury, having gone off injured the week before, they said he could be out for up to 2 months, so it'd be close towards finals by the time he comes back. He did come back early the last time he got injured, I think. So hopefully that's one of those things where, like, it's just an estimate and he recovers quicker than the average. But I think they missed him on 2 counts. I think they missed him just because he was the solid option who was settled in that spot, but also they missed him because he's a ball player. And when you can't, like, you're just missing out on that dude who can thread that extra pass and make sure you can hold possession in tight situations, particularly against a pressing team. Like, you can't hold the ball, then suddenly you're under pressure coming back, and defense has to do more defending. And if you're already weakened defensively, well, that's what happens. You expose yourselves to the potential of more mistakes, and that's pretty much why they lost to Melbourne Victory. So Clayton Lewis isn't coming back in the next few weeks, but hopefully it's sooner rather than later, because I do suspect they miss him quite a bit.
As we know, championship bandwagon, championship mana, you need a bit of defense, and it'll be good to see the Wellington Phoenix show some defensive things, because either way you're going to learn about their defensive levels in this game coming up. Big up yourself, listening, watching. Big up Aotearoa. Big up Kartene Clark going berserk in Super Smash.
Still going.
He's still going. I don't want to mention the milestone. We'll just leave it there. No curses, no cruxes around here. What's it called? Is crux just short for Horcrux? Who knows? I don't know.
I don't even know.
Yeah. Big up yourself. Kia kaha. Stay beautiful. Chicha.